and that's important too. But there have been bumps, as you point out. Here comes Chairman Nadler. Let's listen in.
Are we all here? This was a very grave and momentous step that we were forced to take today to move a contempt citation against the Attorney General of the United States. We did not relish doing this, but we have no choice. Attorney General Barr, having proved himself to be the personal attorney to President Trump rather than the Attorney General of the United States, by misleading the public as to the contents of the Mueller report twice, by not being truthful with Congress, has shown himself to be the personal attorney of the United States rather than the Attorney General. And now he has taken it a much greater step farther in turning the entire Department of Justice into an instrument of Trump personally, rather than an instrument of justice and a representative of the United States. By seeking to evade, to bar all subpoenas, and the President said it, that they will resist all subpoenas, not just with reference to the Mueller report or to the Russian attack on our democracy, but with reference to anything, to reference to the Department of Justice's turnaround on their position in court on the Affordable Care Act, to references to investigations of security clearances, to references to the decisions to tear babies away from their mothers at the borders, to everything. They are uniformly rejecting subpoenas from Congress. This means that they have decided to oppose the role of Congress as a coordinate branch of government representing the American people. They are stonewalling the American people from all information, and this cannot be. We cannot have a government where all the information is in the executive branch, where the American people and the Congress are stonewalled as to information that they need to make decisions and to know what's going on. So while this is stonewalling information with respect to the Russian attack on our democracy in 2016, with respect to the President's campaign cooperation with that attack, to the President's obstructions of justice in seeking to stop the investigation of that attack, it goes far broader than that. It's an attack on the ability of the American people to know what the executive branch is doing and to have responsible government. It is an attack on the essence of our democracy, and we must oppose this with every fiber of our being. And that's why we today referred a contempt citation to the House floor. The House will have to vote that contempt citation to begin the court battle. There can be no higher stakes than this attempt to arrogate all power to the executive branch away from Congress, and more important, away from the American people. We've talked for a long time about approaching a constitutional crisis. We are now in it. We are now in a constitutional crisis. Benjamin Franklin in 1787 was asked when he exited the Constitutional Convention, "What type of government have you given us, sir?" And he said, by a woman who asked him the question, he said, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." Now is the time of testing whether we can keep a republic or whether this republic is destined to change into a different, more tyrannical form of government as other republics have over the centuries. We must resist this. This is far broader than Republican or Democratic or even the rights of Congress. This is whether we can put limits on the power of the president, any president, and the executive branch, and hold the president, any president, accountable. That's what is at stake here. We cannot flinch, and we will not flinch.
Mr. Nadler, if you're in a constitutional crisis, why are you resistant to moving forward with impeachment?
Well, I'm not going to talk about impeachment, but that may be the short answer is that may not be the best answer in this constitutional crisis. There are a lot of considerations for that, and that may not be the best answer for this constitutional crisis.
What would be the best answer?
Well,
I mean, if you're not thinking about impeachment right now, do you think this goes to the floor next week and then you move to court?
This will go to the floor rapidly. I don't know whether it's next week or not, but it'll be on the floor soon.
And how does that compare with, I know Democrats are looking for tax returns and that could go to the floor, potentially McGahn being held in contempt. How are you guys going to balance that, prioritize what comes first?
Well, we'll see what happens. We are still planning to have Mr. McGahn appear before us, to have Mr. Mueller appear before us. The president has made that more difficult by ordering Mueller not to appear and by ordering McGahn not to submit documents that we've subpoenaed. And by the way, these documents, the White House makes a nonsensical claim, and the Department of Justice this morning, for all these various documents. They say they're executive privilege. Most of them are not executive privilege. And remember something about executive privilege. It's not a blanket bar. Nixon, in the Nixon case, the tapes, you all remember or have read about the tapes, these were the most sensitive to executive privilege. They were private conversations between the president and his advisors, and the Supreme Court ruled 8-0 that the interests of the public in justice and in accountability outweighed the interests of the president in privacy, and ordered those tapes revealed. And of course, when the tapes were revealed, it led to Nixon's resignation. So, number one. Number two, executive privilege is designed to get candor by the president's advisors to advise him. Once that has gone public, once the president has said it's okay to share those conversations or that evidence or whatever with the Mueller investigation, with your private attorney, with whoever, once it's been published, there is no more privilege because it's done already. Everything we have requested, the unredacted part, all the material in the redacted parts of the Mueller report, all the material that we've requested in the various subpoenas, none of it is privileged because all of it, they waived the privilege by enabling it to go public to Mueller or to whoever. So it's a nonsense claim. We will win these court fights because the law is one-sided. And when the president or Attorney General Barr or anybody else cites executive privilege in these cases, they are not being honest. They're not being honest because there's no real claim at all.
Chairman Nadler, are we to perceive this as you say these are going to be court fights you will be fighting, as a civil contempt then? Is there going to be any criminal part of this or any inherent that we've heard about?
It'll probably be a civil contempt.
And why not go with inherent, as some of your colleagues have suggested? Because
well, I don't want to answer that question because I'm not sure we won't.
You're not sure you wouldn't go with inherent?
That's right.
Mr. Chairman, you said that the president has ordered Mueller not to testify. Are you referring to his tweet last week saying Mueller should not testify?
Yes.
How has that made that harder? Has Mueller specifically told you that he doesn't feel he can testify?
No, but it obviously puts a lot of pressure on Mueller, and the discussions are ongoing.
How are the discussions? Are they breaking?
They're ongoing.
Are you going to go to court and ask the judge to unseal the grand jury material without the Justice Department?
Yes, we will. Now, in every prior case, the Attorney General has joined the Judiciary Committee, or I think sometimes other committees, but has joined Congress in asking for a grand jury material. In every case, all the major cases, that has been granted. The Attorney General, this Attorney General Barr, has simply said he won't do that. He's not given a reason why he won't do it. He's not given a reason why he's breaking precedent and refusing to support what will be our application for the grand jury information. He has not said he'll oppose it, but he's said either they will oppose it or not, or take no position. But in every previous case, the Attorney General has joined the committee in requesting the release of that grand jury committee information. It's always been granted to the committee, and the committee has handled it responsibly. It hasn't leaked, and it's been used properly.
Will you timeline on that?
No.
Will you issue a subpoena for the other? When will you issue the subpoena for the other 4 former White House officials, including Hope Hicks?
When it seems most advisable to do so.
Are you concerned, though, that this move to invoke executive privilege will essentially be a chilling effect for
Of course we're concerned. We're concerned that the President's declaration and the apparent intention to deny all information is going to be a chilling effect or more. Remember, in every case that people have talked about, whether it be former Attorney General Holder or last year when this committee under Republican control demanded all sorts of grand jury information and FBI interviews and all sorts of things, and were given 880,000 pages. In every situation, there's been an accommodation, and there's been more or less information given. This year, we have gotten not one page of information in response to any subpoena, nor have any other committees in the House. There have been absolutely not one single page has been given. A total stonewalling of Congress, a total stonewalling of the American people, and that is an assertion of tyrannical power by the president, and it cannot be allowed to stand. The American people have to have a government responsive to them, and that means the president and the Congress.
Sir, do you see this as a fact-gathering for impeachment, or as a wholly distinct matter?
I see this as a fact-gathering, which may or may not lead to. I mean, as I've said many times, we need the facts, we need all the information, and decisions like that or other things will be made down the road when we have the facts.
If you can't get the facts, how are you going to proceed?
We are going to have to insist on getting the facts. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that was the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Congressman Jerry Nadler of New York, talking about how, in his view, quote, we are now in a constitutional crisis. Let's get reaction from our experts here. Jen Psaki, is he overstating the case? Is this a constitutional crisis?
Well, I think many people in the Democratic caucus agree with him, and many of the American people agree with him. I think we also saw, though, the awkward challenge Democrats are going to have moving forward, which is saying it's a constitutional crisis and then saying we're not impeaching. Right now, I agree with that strategy because I think you need the public with you, and you need the caucus with you, and I think Pelosi is running a smart game here. But that is going to be a very tricky public tightrope to walk, and we saw that play out there a little bit in the press conference.
David?
I'm just going to say I agree with Jen. Look, you can't have it both ways. You can't you can't break the glass and say we're having a crisis and then say, well, it's not that big a crisis. There's only, I don't know, there's only one type of constitutional crisis, I would think, right? It's pretty big, break glass. So if you think it's a constitutional crisis, you should impeach the president. If you don't think it's a constitutional crisis, move on.
The constitutional crisis being that the White House is refusing to comply with any subpoenas and the ability of Democrats to conduct oversight, or the constitutional crisis being the larger issue the Democrats talk about, which is President Trump's, in their view, obstruction of justice in the Mueller investigation and the conversations that went back and forth between Trump team members and the Russians during the campaign?
I think the answer to that is yes. I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, you know, Jerry Nadler there was talking a lot about, you know, the congressional power and how the White House was taking all the power. So there's a lot of battle between the branches right now, and that's going to continue. But yeah, it's all of it. It is, but they're going to have to contend with members and their base who are going to really start pushing and getting loud about, you know, you need to do something about this. Mm-hmm. This is why you're there. Now, certain members and Nancy Pelosi would disagree. But even her rhetoric was a little bit harsher yesterday.
Well, I think they want to bring people with them and scare the people who aren't quite there yet in the public while saying, wait, we're not there yet, but come with us on the journey. Mm-hmm. And that's a very hard thing to do.
And we were talking, Sarah, about what the Democrats won the House on, the issues having to do with health care, having to do with opioids, having to do with things along those lines. Democrats, when you ask them, you're focused all this energy on Bill Barr and President Trump, on the Mueller report. What about all the reasons you got elected? Say, oh, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. But my question is, are they chewing gum? We see them walking towards impeachment, but are they chewing gum?
I think they're going to have to prove that they can walk and chew gum at the same time. I mean, in some ways, they can point to the fact that, look, we watch Republicans try to overturn health care, and like we fought them tooth and nail, and we were able to sort of keep that at bay. That's certainly what we saw during the midterms. But they are going to have to be able to say, look, we are doing this in Congress because it is our job to do this in Congress. It is our job to conduct oversight, particularly on an administration like this that is, so far entrenched that they're trying to block us at every turn. But they're also going to have to show that they're trying to fight for other things, along the way, and that they're actually doing it in Congress and not just on the campaign trail. I think right now it's sort of the dynamic we're seeing these candidates go out there and talk about these policy ideas that they have, particularly Elizabeth Warren, when they're out on the campaign trail, but we're not seeing the same sort of battle for them in Congress. And that's something that I think constituents should be asking about and should be somewhat worried about. You can't just go out there and sort of talk the talk. You have to show that you're actually fighting for it.
I just want this just in as the Justice Department just issued a statement, and no surprise, they are accusing this vote of being politically motivated, and they faulted the chairman of the committee, Congressman Jerry Nadler, Democrat of New York, for basically pushing President Trump into a corner where he was forced to assert executive privilege, not something he wanted to do. And there seems to be a lot of gamesmanship going on here. You heard Nancy Pelosi the other day saying President Trump he's trying to goad us into impeaching him. You hear Justice Department saying you forced us to assert executive privilege.
Well, to kind of amplify what Sarah's saying there too, there are 33 of the 40 Democrats who were elected were quote new Dems. They're kind of very conservative Democrats, Connor Lambs of the world, in very tough districts are going to be running. And it's where impeachment is not a big issue, and it's going to be very difficult. I suspect that the Speaker Pelosi is going to hear from those in her caucus who have very tough elections that don't want to get anywhere near impeachment and want to get to the issues that won them this election. And there's going to be a big push for that.
You've already heard them try to move off of it a little bit, right? I mean, remember when it was Infrastructure Week last week on Monday? I mean, even if that bill never comes to fruition, you could see...
They talked about infrastructure.
They talked about infrastructure. They talked to the president.
For the first time in the history of infrastructure.
That's right.
They talked about infrastructure.
Seriously. So you can see around the edges them trying to start other conversations. Now, it doesn't stay there.
I also think you can, if you are a Democrat and you're running president right now, you can go out there and say, don't you want us to be able to go back to running the government like like it's a government where we are not constantly having to fight the White House about whether the president tried to obstruct justice, every single day when he woke up and started tweeting from, the bedroom of the White House? Don't you want to be able to talk about things like infrastructure and healthcare instead of whether the president colluded with the Russians? So if you want to do that, elect someone who's not President Trump.
Yeah, I think also on campaigns, it's just such a different world than Washington. It is an aspirational world where you are trying to lay out a hopeful vision of what you would do different than the guy currently occupying the Oval Office. So I think it's smart for them, and I don't think they will start talking about impeachment because they want to say exactly as you said, we're going to bring things back to normalcy. We're going to fight for health care. We're going to fight to address the opioids epidemic. If things change and the politics shift, it will shift on the trail too. But until then, I don't think it will.
But you heard Matt Gaetz at the opening of this hearing say to Nadler, look, we had the First Step Act. What about the Second Step Act, Mr. Chairman? There are all these things. We could be doing opioids now.
For justice reform.
He was saying, look at all the things we're not doing in this committee because we're doing it. I think it was very smart of him to lay down the marker, all the things they're not doing.
And he talked about a potential working with Congressman Eric Swalwell, bipartisan effort.
Right, so Gaetz, which is a big move, yeah.
Yeah, but Matt Gaetz from Florida, Republican, certainly not a shrinking violet when it comes to taking up the Republican mantle.